Title this World War II Part 9. This is the Pacific Theater. So we're going to start with Pearl Harbor. December 7th, 1941, 7:55 a.m. The time is important. Japan launched a massive surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. 8 battleships were destroyed, including 3 cruisers and 3 destroyers. 2,400 men were killed. We actually had this. We had some idea that this was going to happen. We had this thing called Operation Magic, which was a code-breaking machine. We could actually read the Japanese code before the Japanese could read it. So we knew many things before even the Japanese did, even in their own transmissions. Okay, and there's even some people that believe that FDR knew about the attack before and didn't do much to stop it because he wanted us in the war. I'm going to stop short of saying that, but that is a theory out there as well. But we had some ideas that this was going to go on. Okay, for instance, on November 30th, General Short, who was in charge of the Army, placed everybody on alert. Pearl Harbor was put on full alert about a week before. Admiral Kimmel, who was in charge of the Navy, would both be blamed for the attack. Okay, Kimmel was the commander of the Navy at Pearl, and there were some ideas that this was going to happen as well. And you know, the worst thing you can have is all the battleships lined up in a row like it was. But that's exactly what happened. But the main problem was the communication between the two sides, between the Army and the Navy. There just wasn't a lot of communication, and it had to go through this whole line of bureaucratic red tape, and by the time everybody was aware of what was going on, it was too late. Okay, there was actually an enemy sub fired upon, and then, as we found out later, sunk in the harbor hours before the attack. And it was actually attacked by the battleship, the USS Ward, and reported it in. I mean, that should have told everybody that there's an imminent attack coming, but that's not how it worked out. So the attack happened, okay? And the mastermind behind the Japanese attack was this guy, Admiral Yamamoto. And the fear was that if they did not achieve their goals, that perhaps they would have failed in crippling the fleet. Okay, their real goal was to attack the aircraft carriers. That's the new weapon and the most powerful weapon in the Navy at the time, and that was their goal. Okay, Admiral Yamamoto never had dreams of marching down, through Washington D.C. He didn't think that would happen, but his hopes were to cripple the naval fleet and then be able to basically run wild in the Pacific. And by the time we recovered, it would be too late. We'd just let them have whatever they wanted. But the aircraft carriers were the key there. In this attack, Japan made many mistakes. Okay, first of all, the first mistake is they didn't get the carriers. Okay, the carriers weren't there. They were supposed to be. They were running a little bit late, supposedly, but they were not there. Okay, so the carriers weren't there, so they were spared. The second thing is Japan did not launch that third wave that was supposed to knock out the fuel reserves. So once Yamamoto found out the carriers were there, he canceled the other waves. The fuel reserves were not destroyed. Okay, and then the third thing is they did not destroy the dry docks The dry dock is where you can repair boats, and all but 2 of the ships would be repaired. And that's definitely going to help our Navy. It definitely cripples us for a little bit, but not as long as intended. Okay, so the 3 huge mistakes: did not get the carriers, did not destroy the fuel reserves, and did not destroy the dry dock. So they made some major mistakes. And as I said, we did too. Okay, we had the submarine that was attacked. We actually picked it up on radar. The General Short had all our planes lined up at the bases because he was afraid that sabotage was a bigger threat than an attack, so our planes were easy targets. So mistakes made on both sides. Now the big question is why? Why did Japan attack us? They needed raw materials and land, and we stood in their way for that. Okay, America insisted Japan withdraw from China. We even gave aid to China. Okay, in their invasion, and we actually had a crew of men that were flying against the Japanese already, called the Flying Tigers. So that was an issue. We also put an oil embargo on them and scrap iron. We stopped trading scrap iron with them as well. And then, of course, the historical control by the military warlords, okay, or the samurai, that whole state of mind. Okay, we talked about Admiral Hirohito was the emperor, but Tojo was really in charge. Okay, Emperor Hirohito and and then the military leader would be Tojo. Okay, they followed this code called Bushido, which was no surrender. Okay, Bushido is Bushido. Bushido. No, it was a personal code of honor under the samurai, old traditions there. So obviously this is going to thrust us into the war. Now when we enter the war, things are bad. Okay, things are really bad. Not only did Japan launch an attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, but they launched an attack pretty much everywhere. Okay, including the Philippines. And Japan invaded the Philippines, Hong Kong, and Indochina, which would be now Vietnam at this time. Hong Kong was a British territory. Indochina was French. Like I said, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand today. So this all fell during this, or was attacked during this time. Okay, so not only was Pearl Harbor attacked, but everywhere else. This was a massive attack. In January of 1942. Manila, the capital of the Philippines, falls. MacArthur escapes to Australia, okay, and he makes a famous vow that he shall return. He actually escaped last minute on a patrol boat and said, "I shall return." In February, okay, we see the Battle of Java Sea. This is a major Allied defeat. We get beat again. Okay, the Japanese had a decisive victory where we lost 5 destroyers, 5 cruisers, and over 2,300 men. So things are not going well against the Japanese. Not at all well at all. So in April, American troops fall and surrender at Bataan. And 75,000 surrendered. Okay, and you got to remember, follow that Bushido code. The Japanese do not surrender. So what do they think of people that do surrender? They're going to think they're weak, worthless. They start marching our men along with the Filipino soldiers, and this is called the Bataan Death March. The Bataan Death March. They had to march 85 miles, not very well fed, struggling with heat exhaustion, illness, you name it. Both American and Filipino soldiers were forced to march under these very difficult situations. Because they surrendered, they did not respect them. Many died along the way. Others were executed if they could not keep up. Okay, survivors were then taken to prison camps. And we wouldn't find this out until 3 years after this happened, when some POWs escaped. And these are some drawings and some pictures. This is an actual picture. This is just seconds. This man would be decapitated in front of all of these people here. Very common for them to execute guys along the way. 20,000 died or murdered along that 85 mile trip. So terrible, terrible situation. Okay, the general in charge that ordered this, he would face war crime trial after the war and would be executed. So it doesn't make it better, but we will see some. All right, now Doolittle's raid, April 18th, 1942. Okay, this was Doolittle's raid on Tokyo. Basically, guys, this was like our revenge for Pearl Harbor. It was basically just saying, hey, we can get to you as well. And on the 18th, 16 planes were launched. They were B-25s from a carrier called the USS Hornet. A Japanese fishing boat or spy boat actually reported them a little bit early, so they had to take off 400 miles early, which as soon as that happened, these pilots knew that they were not going to get back to the ship. Okay, they weren't going to get back. They knew that their only hope was to make it to China. Here's what a B-25 looked like. So many of Doolittle's raiders were either captured or killed once they got there. Some of it made to China and would be helped by the Chinese. As punishment, the Chinese, because of the Chinese help, the Japanese murdered 250,000 men, women, and children as their punishment. Okay. All the aircraft were lost. 11 men were lost. 69 men did survive and made it through. Some were taken as prisoners. You know, basically, it didn't cause a lot of damage. It was more of a morale boost, and kind of confused the Japanese of what was going on, and it really made them commit to what's coming up, the Battle of Midway, because they realized that they had to do something. This is at the Air Force Base, Air Force Museum. This is really neat. They just stopped doing this. They would have the survivors would meet up yearly and toast their comrades. And you can see here these goblets that are standing up. Those are the guys that are still around. 1, 2, 3. Okay. There's a fourth one here. There's now, this was taken a couple years ago, there's 3 guys that are still alive, and they just, last year was their last toast, because the 3 that were still kicking, one guy can't travel anymore, so they agreed not to do it. That was their last one. But you can see this on display at the Air Force Museum. Pretty neat thing. Now, the Battle of Corregidor. Okay, in May, Corregidor fell, which was a garrison guarding Manila Bay. It was just right outside, this island right here. It was an outpost located there. This would be the peak of Japan's power. This is as high as they'll go. Okay, and this was very important that we need to stop this. I mean, it's growing and growing and growing. Okay, this is actually not looking good for Australia. Okay, things are not going very well, and Australia is would be the next target. Okay, so let's stop there today, and we will continue with the Battle of Coral Sea next. So stay classy, Vandalia.